Now, the World Health Organization has held a ceremony to honour Henrietta Lacks, an African-American woman who died in 1951, for her enduring contribution to medical science. Cell samples from Mrs. Lacks, taken without her consent, became the first ever to survive and multiply outside the human body. Aruna Iyengar reports.
Henrietta Lacks was my grandmother. My grandmother was a black American woman who was born on August 1st, 1920 in Roanoke, Virginia, to Eliza and Johnny Pleasant.
The ceremony at the World Health Organization was to honour Henrietta Lacks, but also as a reckoning for past injustices. A poor tobacco farmer and mother of 5, she was just 31 years old when she died of cervical cancer in 1951. During treatment, some of her cancerous cells were removed without her consent. What was groundbreaking was they were the first living human cells ever to survive and multiply outside the human body. This woman had immortal cells. The cells named HeLa are still used today. They've been used in research that led to the polio vaccine, gene mapping, cancer and IVF treatments. Most recently, they've helped to make COVID vaccines. They've also helped create the HPV vaccine, which protects against cervical cancer, the disease which claimed Henrietta's life. She died in a segregated ward and was buried in an unmarked grave. It was only in 1975 that by chance the family found out about her legacy. Since then, they've sought guardianship of her cells and recognition for her contribution to medical science.
Henrietta Lacks' cells were grown by the millions, commercialized, distributed worldwide for researchers and enabling countless advances in medicine. While HeLa cells were making a global impact, Henrietta's family was not informed.
The WHO said the racial inequality Mrs. Lacks suffered is still an issue, saying it stood in solidarity with marginalised patients and communities all over the world who are not consulted, engaged or empowered in their own care.
We affirm that in medicine and in science, Black lives matter. Henrietta Lacks' life mattered and still matters.
Henrietta's family says the WHO recognition allows them to reclaim her name, her story and wider appreciation that her legacy lives on. Aruna Iyengar, BBC News.
Well, Dr. Clyde Yancey is a member of the Henrietta Lacks Foundation and also Chief of Cardiology at Northwestern University's Feinberg School of Medicine, as well as being Vice Dean of their Diversity and Inclusion Department. Joins us from Chicago. Thanks very much for coming on the programme.
Thank you for the invitation.
So why is a day like today significant then for you?
I think this is an incredibly important day. The only way we can avoid the missteps of the past is to acknowledge the history. And in this case, not only acknowledge the history, but actually celebrate the gift. It wasn't a gift under the usual circumstances, but so many have benefited. So it's very important to acknowledge the history and understand what we can do differently as we go forward.
Yeah, and we've heard a little bit of the science there about some of the impact, but just broaden that out for us. What has the impact been here?
Well, think about how important it is to have tissue that we can study that not only approximates the human condition, but actually is the human condition. So many times we use animal data or animal cells, when in point of fact, that doesn't always track very well with the human experience. In this very unusual case, we have actual human cells. So if you will, it's been a short circuit. It's been a leapfrog towards answers that otherwise would have taken a long time to retrieve. Because we have the precise biological information, we can do more careful experiments. And you've heard the litany of findings that have led to better human health.
Yeah, there can't be too many people who have had such a long and widespread impact on other people's health.
Well, here's the irony. This was a functionally illiterate, very young, very poor woman who had no idea that her cells were even harvested. Yet her gift to science and to medicine may be more significant, more magnificent than many other gifts we've already acknowledged over the decades with any number of prizes and accolades. It really is remarkable when you juxtapose her social circumstances with the gift that her cells have provided.
And just because people will be slightly concerned, obviously, about that harvesting, Is this something that is completely confined to the past, decades and decades ago now?
So the one important thing I can share with you is that we have to understand the history. At the time that Henrietta Lacks underwent her surgery, informed consent really hadn't been invented. And we can really attribute those kinds of scenarios that she experienced as the leverage that allowed us to enter a world that we exist in now, where we have a high bar of respect for personal health information and where we insist on truly informed consent before we do procedures, before we harvest tissues. Where we still don't have clarity is on how do we utilize that human tissue, particularly if there are subsequent discoveries. That still requires a precedent that's not yet been established.
I see. Well, it is a remarkable legacy. Dr. Clyde Yancey, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.